Two balls and a strike to count on Taylor. Reyes fires, swinging a drive, deep left field. This is one back. Walk the ball. Let's Taylor.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into DodgerHeads, presented by DodgerBlue.com. My name is Jeff Spiegel, joined today by our friend Daniel Starkand and his friend Mr. Broom. We've even got some sound effects. Let's get these things going. There we go. Dodgers sweeping the Diamondbacks. How we feeling, Mr. Broom?
He's feeling
Beautiful.
good. Nice little 4-game sweep. That's 8 straight over the Diamondbacks, 2 4-game series over the last 2 weeks. Obviously the Diamondbacks are not the toughest opponent out there, so you kind of expect it, but it's always nice, when they win 4 straight. We know how tough this division is with, the Padres and the Giants and whatnot, so every win counts. No, I do not think the Dodgers played their best baseball by any means over the weekend, outside of maybe that game, that 14-1 game or whatever it was. But hey, the important thing is you're getting wins. You're keeping the train rolling, and right now, they're playing good baseball despite, some injuries they've had to deal with. So that's good to see.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. We've talked about this a bunch, but as a Dodgers fan, it feels like, I would say the last stretch of baseball is as close as we've seen to feeling like they're starting to hit their stride. I mean, you look, they've won 13 out of their last 15 since a 4-game losing streak. They just went on a 10-day road trip to Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., and Arizona, won 8 of the 10. They have the best record in baseball. They're on pace for 114 wins. They're 3 games up in the division, which honestly feels like a freaking Grand Canyon between them and the Padres, because that's the biggest number we've seen in a while. The Giants are 7.5 games back. The Dodgers are 33-14. You look at statistically, they're first in runs, first in on-base percentage, first in slugging, first in walk rate, first in starting pitching ERA, third in relief pitching ERA. And so it's kind of disgusting how good the Dodgers are when you consider that. I wouldn't say they played poorly, but it does feel like they're up clicking at maybe 85 to 90%. And that's not to say teams like the Yankees and Mets are at 100%, because they're all dealing with their own stuff, the Padres missing Tatis, etc. But man, this team to be clicking at 85%, to be on 114 win pace, to have on pace for the MLB record for run differential, it's pretty ridiculous when you step back and look and say, as much as we might overanalyze the Dodgers compared to everyone else in the league, it's pretty impressive.
Yeah. And I think part of what makes it seem at least like they're really finally hitting their stride, I think the main thing is, first of all, the top of the order, the top 3 guys, Mookie, Freddie, and Trey. Those guys are all superstars, and right now they're all playing like superstars. So when you have 3 guys like that, it's hard to, it's hard to maneuver that if you're an opposing pitcher. And then on the pitching side of thing, obviously, the Dodger pitching has been great all year, but specifically the starting rotation.
Yeah.
As of late, even with, Kershaw out, Heaney out, you got guys up there that are performing, putting up all-star type numbers. Tyler Anderson, Tony Gonsolin, Pepio comes up and look, probably gave his best outing the other day. So I think just right now, like you said, this is the best they've looked all season. It seems that kind of every unit is doing their job how they're supposed to. When you look on paper, this is not necessarily the most stacked the Dodgers will be. We're expecting Kershaw and those guys back. Obviously, Blake Trinan eventually. They got some pieces to come back. Max Muncy just goes on the IL. Hopefully he could get healthy and come back and resemble something closer to what we're used to with Max Muncy. But right now it's just kind of the next man up mentality, which is kind of what we didn't see last year. Even though, they still won a ton of games, it didn't feel like they would be able to call guys up from AAA and they'd be able to come up right away and produce. What we're seeing this year is, that they have that, guys out of the bullpen, guys out of the rotation. Kevin Pillar comes up yesterday and makes a diving catch in left field. So it's just kind of, it's just kind of an easy environment to play in right now. I feel like guys are having fun, and the wins are coming with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And so here's the plan for today's show. We're going to do a bigger set of buying and selling. I think there's 4 guys in particular that I want us to take some time and hone in on. Edwin Rios is a guy who has played a bunch of late. And let's talk about Edwin Rios, where his ceiling is. We're going to talk about Tony Gonsolin and Tyler Anderson. You talk about the starting rotation having the best ERA in baseball. Those 2 guys are largely responsible for that, the performances they've been. And then a guy that I think, depending on, might not seem controversial to some people, but Craig Kimbrel. He's got a 4.5 ERA. Kind of where do we stand on Kimbrel? So that'll be kind of the bulk of it. Then we'll talk about Pirates and Mets, which is the Dodgers homestand this upcoming week. So that's the plan for today. But let's start with our friend Edwin Rios. And I'll phrase it like this. Has Edwin Rios reached his ceiling? This is a guy that has started now 8 games in a row and has performed. I'll throw some numbers at you, Daniel. He's 28 years old. So he's basically the same age as Walker Buehler, Tony Gonsolin. He's just a year older than Cody Bellinger and Will Smith. Those are all guys that we would not say have peaked athletically and from an age perspective. Rios is right in that mix. If you take out the 2021 season where he was dealing with a shoulder injury that ended up requiring surgery, he was out for the year. Take that year out. Here is his career line: 219 plate appearances, 18 home runs, 261 batting average, an on base around 320, a slugging percentage around 600, 1.4 wins above replacement. So you know, I would say 2.5 of that is pretty much like a full season. You do that, and you're looking at a guy who's got 45 home runs, an OPS over 900, and a 4 to 4.5 win player. I'm not saying that's what he's going to be, but even just this year, he's got the highest barrel percentage on the team if he were to qualify for that. And it's a guy who's done it at AAA as well. You could look at his numbers there: 50 home runs in 243 games. Again, an OPS around 900 as well. So Rios getting an extended string in the lineup now that Muncy is out. Where are you at on Rios? I mean, how high is what we're seeing sustainable, I guess is the way I'll phrase it.
I think it's sustainable as long as you kind of keep putting him in, positions to succeed. I don't think he's necessarily an every single day player that you bat fourth no matter what. Like, I definitely think he hits better against right-handed pitching, although he does hit the homer off Bumgarner on a pitch at his eyes the other night. So that was cool to see. But yeah, I definitely think this is sustainable. We've seen pretty much outside of last year, like, he's pretty much hit well every year. We've seen him with the Dodgers in limited opportunities, which that in itself is not easy. Like, being in and out of the lineup, not knowing when you're going to play, not knowing who you're going to face, that's definitely not an easy task. And he's, succeeded. So I definitely think he's, this is kind of what he is. And I think that's a very valuable player to have. Like, you see a guy like Max Muncy goes down, he's on the IL now, and the team doesn't miss a beat. There's actually, you could argue the team even got better, by replacing what Muncy was giving them with what Rios is giving them. So yeah, I definitely think what we're seeing with Rios is who he is. He's a guy who's he's going to strike out a decent amount. He's not going to walk a ton, but he also has a ton of power, and he's going to come up with some big hits for you. Right now he's second on the team in home runs behind Mookie, and he's obviously hasn't played nearly as much as a lot of the other main guys. So, I definitely like what I've been seeing from him. He definitely seems like he's taking the right approach up there, and success is coming with it.
Yeah, I think he's 10th on the team in plate appearances and second in home runs, as you said. And, the joke with him is he's sort of flirted with that 1 home run every 10 plate appearances of metric throughout his entire career. And, he's got 6 home runs and 76 at bats this year. So, 12, 13-ish, every 12 or 13-ish at bats, he's getting a home run. But yeah, Rios is a fascinating case study because I've felt like over the last 3 or 4 years, he was the guy who maybe suffered the most from the depth of the Dodgers. He felt like a guy that as a 25-year-old probably would have been starting on half of the teams around Major League Baseball. He just happened to be in an organization where there weren't any openings. And then last year, which would have been his best opportunity, unfortunately, he's one of the first guys to go down. And so imagine what the Dodgers would have been like last year if it was Edwin Rios getting extra at-bats instead of Billy McKinney and Sheldon Noisy and these guys, DJ Peters, who all struggled in their time with the Dodgers. And so I'm a believer. You mentioned the strikeout rate. I think Fabian Ardaya had a number that it's like 40%. That's not a good number. That's a really bad number. But again, if you take that 40% number and he's hitting home runs at a 1 out of every 12 plate appearances sort of rate, that evens itself out. And Dave Roberts has had quotes lately saying Rios has become a better hitter. He's not just a low ball hitter anymore, but the pitch that he took out from Mad Bum the other night was sort of up and in, which is typically a zone that you would think Rios can't get to. We know he's got the strength once he gets the bat on the ball, but even just looking, I said he had started 8 games in a row for the Dodgers until Sunday going 0 for 4. He had hits in 5 of the last, the 5 games prior to that. So he's getting on base. As I said, he's got a 273 average for the month of May this year. it's pretty impressive because you look and you say, okay, the power is going to be there. The power I would bet on being sustainable. This is a guy that, is going to remain in Major League Baseball because he can hit home runs at the rate that he hits homers at. The question is, what's the batting average going to be? Are we going to be looking at like a 180, 210 batting average type of thing with that power? Well, no, if he can hit 230, 240, 250, I mean, right now he's hitting over 260. If he can do that, the whole package is there. We know he's not going to be a plus defender. He's going to have to play some third base, but with the DH available, I mean, Justin Turner could play third base. Rios could DH. I think all in all, this is a guy that's going to slot nicely in to the Dodger lineup. And I don't think the Dodgers, even as the best team in baseball, miss a beat with him in there.
Yeah. Yeah. And honestly, I'm just happy for Edwin more than anything because like you said, he's kind of been the guy who's gotten screwed over, like as far as the Dodgers having a ton of depth and not having, at bats to give him. Cause like it's always been like a wonder with him. It's like, if you just let this guy play every day and give him 600 plate appearances, like how many homers would he hit? Like, I think, he could maybe hit 35 homers if he was like, let's say on the Baltimore Orioles or something playing every day. So he hasn't gotten that opportunity on the Dodgers. So I'm just happy for him that he's finally getting a chance to play and he's making the most of it to this point.
Yeah, and this is a guy that, in theory, the Dodgers could have under team control for a number of years. And so you factor that in and you feel good about a guy like Edwin Rios. So I'll rephrase the question just as a summary here then. The Edwin Rios that we are seeing, 6 home runs and 76 at-bats with a 260 batting average. I mean, do you feel like that's sustainable? Like if I gave you the over-under on Edwin Rios' batting average of 250, would you take the over or the under?
I'll take the over. I think it's sustainable. I don't think he's doing any, like, it's not even like he's like red hot, like, oh my God, this guy's on fire. Like, it's not going to last forever. Like, he's just kind of just been slow and steady, producing when he's been given the opportunities. So that's why I feel like it is sustainable.
Yeah. 250 seems about right to me. I mean, he might dip a little bit under that, but if that number stays above 240 and he ends up with 25 home runs at the end of the year, like that is going to be fantastic because the slugging percentage is going to be there. And so I like that from Rios. Just looking, by the way, he's a free agent in 2026. So next year will be his first year of arbitration. Look, we know the Dodgers roster building strategy has been go and sign superstars and surround them with guys that are not yet free agents. Well, if you can have Edwin Rios for 2023, 2024, and 2025 without any questions asked at a pretty low salary, even as it gets into arbitration, that's a good thing. And look, at third base, I mean, DH now available. There's going to first base, obviously with Freddie Freeman locked up, but between third base and DH, there are going to be some opportunities for Rios. Maybe he can provide you a serviceable left field. I don't know if the Dodgers would be betting on that, but I expect him to be part of the plans for the next few years. Or I guess if you want to go the complete opposite direction, he could be a guy that could be a trade piece if they do need to free up some space on the 40-man roster. Although that one doesn't seem to make a ton of sense to me, at least not this year. All right, moving along in our buying and selling set. Let's talk starting pitching. The early success of Tony Gonsolin and Tyler Anderson. Are you buying or selling? I'll throw some numbers at you again, Daniel. As you know, done a little StatCast research using baseballsavant.com. Let's talk about Tony Gonsolin to start. 1.80 ERA. That would be the best mark in the National League if he was qualified. He's just 2 innings short of qualification, but that would have been the best mark. 4th in all of Major League Baseball. He's got a .93 whip. That would be 7th in baseball. He's allowing hitters to hit 166 against him. That would be the best in baseball. That's again in 45 innings pitched. For his career, 2.59 ERA. That's across 36 starts and 8 relief appearances, a 15-5 record. I'll get into the StatCast stuff in a minute, but one other note, 3 straight 6 innings or more starts. That's the first time in his career he had ever done that. Now he's done it 3 times in a row. So I'll let you go from there, and then I can come back with some more numbers after. But Gonsolin as a whole, how are you feeling about how things are? Does this feel sustainable to you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure an ERA that starts with a 1 is sustainable for anyone. So in that sense, no. But I do think, overall, can he be a good pitcher that gives the Dodgers some length? I think he's proven it the last 3 starts. You just mentioned 6 innings in 3 starts in a row. That's great to see. This last one, like he kind of in the middle of it, it looked like, he gave up a couple runs, got hit around a little bit. So you're like, all right, like here, Tony Gonsolin's about to, finally come crashing back down to earth, but then he resettles back in and gets through 6 with just the 2 runs allowed. So I think he's been great all year. It's been fun to watch. He's kind of like the Rios of the pitching staff, where in the sense that he's always put up good numbers, but he hasn't necessarily gotten all the opportunities just because of how many other great starters the Dodgers have had. So now with a couple guys out with injuries, he's finally getting those opportunities. He's making the most of it. Like I said, I don't expect him to sustain a 1.8 ERA, but high 2s, low 3s, that's what he's been his entire career pretty much. I definitely think that's sustainable. I think his stuff, obviously we know the splitter is great. That's been his pitch his whole career pretty much, but the slider's been looking good. The fastball has ticked up a little bit. So I definitely think this is pretty much the best we've seen out of Tony Gonsolin. And as long as he stays healthy, I think he could be, that type of pitcher where he's in most other rotations, he's like a number 2 or high-end number 3 starter. The Dodgers have the luxury where he's like your 4th or 5th starter.
Yeah. You mentioned some of the pitches. We'll get into that. I mean, just looking at StatCast. So the one number that concerns me, 2 numbers that I would say are concerning about Gonsolin, if you want to worry, are his walk rate, which is not good. Below average, I would say. It's not terrible. I mean, I will say this, that number is better than his career average and well above what it was last year, much better than it was last year. He's allowing his batting average on balls in play is 209. That's way below average. So typically that's a number that you would expect to regress to the mean. But here's why, if you want to be optimistic about Gonsolin, he's 98th percentile for hard hit rate. So that explains if the reason guys aren't reaching when the ball gets in play is because they're not hitting the ball hard. That would be he's top 10% in expected weighted on base average, expected ERA, expected batting average, expected slugging percentage. And you kind of hinted at the pitch mix, and that was where I wanted to dive in a little bit and say, is there something we're seeing differently about Gonsolin that has caused him to maybe go up a level? Because again, another guy who's like 28 years old, and so he's not yet reached his prime, especially given how few innings he's had to pitch at the major leagues level. But here's what's interesting. He's now throwing his fastball 10% less than he was last year. So 33.6% of the time you're seeing fastball. That's the lowest rate of his career. The split finger is what has increased. That's a changeup / split finger. They don't know what to call it, but that's up around 28%. He's throwing more curveballs than ever, 14.4%, which is up 6% over last year. The slider is 24%, roughly the same. Looking at how those pitches are performing, the split finger, 2.4 more inches of vertical drop than last year. That's 2.1 more vertical inches of drop than the average split finger. The slider is dropping 1.9 inches less. So maybe a little bit of differentiation. The slider is just going horizontally, whereas the split finger has much more vertical movement, I think is interesting. And then you go to pitch value. Okay, so Baseball Savant tracks numbers to basically say, what are the best pitches in all of baseball? Tony Gonsolin's splitter is the 14th most valuable pitch in baseball this year. His slider is number 43. So Tony Gonsolin has 2 of the 43 best pitches in all baseball. You take all this pitchers, relief pitchers and starters, multiplied by how many pitches they throw, 2, 3, or 4. Tony Gonsolin has 2 of the top 45. To me, all of that adds up. I'm with you. I don't think it's going to be a 1 point something ERA at the end of the year, but if you're asking me, do I think that number stays below 3? I think there's a really good chance because A, I'm watching it in front of me, and B, even the sample size. Look, we're not talking about a small sample size, 36 career starts. Yes, those aren't a ton of innings per start, but 36 starts is like a year and a half for most pitchers. He's done this at the major league level, 2.59 career ERA. So my guess is that his ERA at the end of the year is somewhere in that 2.6, 2.7 range, but I'm buying Gonsolin. So I'll come back. Let's say 7.5 over or under ERA at the end of the year for Tony Gonsolin.
I'll say slightly over. I think it'll be high 2s, low 3s, kind of like I said. If you look at his FIP right now, I believe it's 3.1. So yeah, like you said, kind of the behind the scenes stuff that you don't necessarily look at doesn't match up with the ERA. Not quite, but it's still really good. But like you said, with his off-speed pitches, like when you got 2 off-speed pitches that are both top 50 in baseball, like you just said, you mentioned he's thrown his fastball less, but when you got off-speed pitches like those ones, it's going to make your fastball play up even more. So even though you're throwing the fastball less, the 95 that you throw is now going to look like 97 or 98 just because of how nasty your off-speed stuff is. Guys have to be sitting on your splitter, which is no fun at all. So I definitely think he's found the pitch mix that works for him. I think that's, the success is going to continue. It's just tough when you're talking about a 2.7 ERA. Like, you can't really afford many like bad starts,
Yeah.
like so Tony Gonsolin could be great all year, but he might have 1 or 2 starts where he gives up 6 or 7 runs, and that's going to balloon your ERA. So I'll go slightly over on the 2.7, but I'm with you. I think he's going to, be really good all year as long as he could stay healthy.
He's an interesting one too, because it always felt like the type of guy where he was allowing traffic and just somehow escaping the jam. And everybody's like, this isn't sustainable. This isn't sustainable. And yet you look at it on one hand, his whip is way down. So I said walks and hits per inning pitch is 0.93. And you consider this a guy with a below average walk rate. That tells you why he's the best at batting average. Like, guys are not getting hits off of Tony Gonsolin. They're getting hits off of him at a lower rate than basically any pitcher in all of baseball. And so not only is the traffic down, but then the hard hit, the batting average on balls in play, those numbers are still down. So there's less guys getting on base, and then they're still making weak contact and when they're trying to move people along or whatnot. So happy for Gonsolin. As many people know, I have been very pro Gonsolin. I've looked at the numbers and said, I'm just buying this guy. And so I'm happy to see that moving on. Speaking of guys that I like, my fellow University of Oregon Duck, Tyler Anderson, has absolutely been shoving. 2.9 ERA for him on the season, 96th percentile walk rate, 94th percentile hard hit rate, 91st percentile in exit velocity, 97th percentile in chase rate. He's got a strikeout rate that's a career high, 24%, a walk rate that is a career low at 3%. This is a guy who's got a little bit of pedigree. First round pick back in 2011. The Dodgers paid him $8 million. So they saw something in him, but he also had a 4.62 ERA for his career coming into the year. So we're seeing a career year from Tyler Anderson. We're not unfamiliar with that type of thing with guys coming over to the Dodgers, but buying or selling Tyler Anderson and the success that he has had this year.
Yeah, I'm buying again. I mean, like you said, this is what the Dodgers do. Like, they find guys who they see a certain trait in them. They see something in one of their pitches. They see something they could change in their mechanics that'll kind of unlock them. They bring them on for relatively cheap. And then next thing you know, that guy's producing at an all-star level. And that's what we've seen out of Tyler Anderson this year. I mean, he didn't even start the year in the starting rotation. He starts in the bullpen. He's kind of that sixth guy that you have, for depth reasons. That depth is much needed early on in the season. We found out with Heaney going down, Kershaw going down, and Anderson stepped right in there and hasn't skipped a beat. I mean, he's at like 21 consecutive scoreless innings, I believe. Yeah. And kind of like what I was just saying with Gonsolin, as far as like the ERA not necessarily being sustainable. Like, if you look now, Tyler Anderson's ERA is 2.9, which the way he's been pitching, you would expect it to be a little better, but he had that one start against Philadelphia where he gave up 7 runs. So kind of like I was saying, it only takes one start to balloon your ERA. But hey, outside of that one start, he's just been incredible. He's another guy who mixes his pitches really well. His fastball is only like 91, 92, but it plays up a lot harder because of his off-speed stuff. He knows how to locate all his pitches. And he kind of messes with hitters' timing a little bit because he's got his funky little delivery.
He messes with my timing, Daniel. He messes with my timing.
So that's definitely not easy when you're a hitter. And that makes you see him blowing 92 by guys. That's because their timing is all messed up.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, pitch mix, another thing I did a deep dive. He's throwing his fastball less than ever, just 30%. That's a career low, 7% less than he was throwing it last year. The changeup, 31.2%. That's a 7% increase over last year. And let's talk about his changeup. Freddie Freeman, I think, had a quote of just saying like, hey, that is not a fun pitch to stand in the box and try and hit. Well, how about this? I said Tony Gonsolin's splitter is the 14th most valuable pitch in the league. Tyler Anderson's changeup, the 12th most valuable pitch in all of Major League Baseball. Guys are whiffing on his changeup 44.9% of the time they swing at it. So if you swing at his changeup, you have a 1 in 2 chance of making contact. That pitch is dropping vertically 5.6 inches more than it was last year. So somehow they've tweaked something where that pitch, the bottom is just falling out of it. Guys cannot touch it. He's also throwing a cutter 26% of the time and a sinker 11% of the time. So you got a 4-pitch mix with one of the best pitches in all of baseball. That is his changeup. Pretty impressive stuff. As I said, the strikeout rate has gone up by 1. The walk rate has dropped 1.5 per 9. You said it. No runs in his last 20 innings pitched. 4 straight appearances with 6 or more innings pitched. He has been absolutely a revelation for the Dodgers. And the question is, can it be sustainable? Have the Dodgers done something? The issue with pitchers is at some point you'd like to think hitters are going to adjust. Like at some point, are his tendencies going to show up on tape and the nobody's used to it now? It's like a guy coming up and then all of a sudden they adjust. With Gonsolin, with Anderson, that's the question. But with Anderson, I mean, like he's not a new pitcher. He's been around the league for a while. It's just a different changeup. I mean, that's all it is. He's throwing the fastball less. So I guess guys could sit on that a little bit less, but it's not like he was a 50, 60% fastball guy to begin with. And so I like what I see out of Anderson. When Freddie Freeman says the changeup is nasty as a guy who's had to face him, and those were in years when his changeup wasn't as good as it is now, I'd like to believe it. And so 2.90 ERA is his ERA now. We're going to expect a little bit of regression. So Daniel, I'll ask you this, 3.30 higher or lower for Tyler Anderson by the end of the year?
I'll say slightly higher than that. I think he'll be like a 3.5 guy, which that's still like really good.
Yeah.
But yeah, to me, what's impressed me most is his like efficiency. It seems like it's always like the 6th inning and he's at like 65 pitches out there. So that's kind of who he is. He's always kind of been a pitch to contact guy, get ground balls. We've seen him missing more bats this year. Like probably, I haven't checked, but he's probably, missing bats at a career high rate. You mentioned the changeup. That's probably why. Like if you got a pitch that's that good and no one's touching it, you're gonna have success. So I mean, we saw that one bad outing kind of ballooned his ERA. I would expect that to happen, once or twice more this season. So I'll put him at 3.5, but that's still really good in my eyes.
Yeah, look, when he came, I was like, hey, if he throws a 4.5 ERA this year, that's going to be league average, and you'll be fine because that's 6 innings, 3 earned runs. So if that goes down to 3.5, the only thing I'm going to be bummed about is that he's on a 1-year deal, and then he's going to be gone after this. He's going to go get paid somewhere else. But impressive stuff for him. Like you said, I don't know if his whiff rate, I could look it up, is the best, but his strikeout rate is a career high. The walk rate is a career low. That is a recipe for being efficient, lowering your pitch count, and being more successful. So kudos again to the Dodgers staff for finding something and unlocking something with Anderson. Again, I think the changeup is the key. He's throwing it 7% more than last year. It's an incredibly valuable pitch. It's dropping more than ever, and guys are swinging and missing more than they ever have. All right, one last buying and selling here before we move on to the week of games ahead, and that's Craig Kimbrel. Craig Kimbrel, buying or selling him as a guy that you trust. I was fascinated after Sunday's game. He comes into the game, and I had multiple people in my life texting me like, okay, here we go, Craig Kimbrel. And I was like, wait a minute, what? Like, are we all freaking out about Craig Kimbrel? Yeah. Because I'm not. I am buying Craig Kimbrel. I think like I'm more confident in Craig Kimbrel now than I was with Kenley Jansen at just about any point. But I also understand the people that say he's got a 4.50 ERA. His strikeout rate is a career low. His walkout rate is better than it has been, his best since 2017. He's allowed runs in 4 of his last 6 appearances, though. So where do you stand on Kimbrel and sort of a level of confidence you have when he enters a tight ball game?
Yeah, I feel like it's been really tough to judge Kimbrel's season to this point just because, I don't know, it's been kind of weird. Like he shows up late. Obviously, that trade happens like less than a week before opening day. He doesn't really pitch in spring training. And I feel like to this point in the season, he's been pitching like once a week. Like the Dodgers haven't had a ton of save opportunities. They've been just killing teams that they haven't needed Kimbrel. So there's been some times where he's had to warm up and then they score more runs and he hasn't come in. So to me, in my opinion, I'm with you. I'm buying Craig Kimbrel. I think his best innings are ahead of him. No, I do not think he's looked great to this point, but like I just said, he's been pitching once a week. So there hasn't been any sort of continuity there to build up. It still feels like he's kind of in spring training mode. So I get why people are concerned because he hasn't looked great, but at the same time, he hasn't blown any games yet. So, that's a positive there. Like his goal when he steps in the game in the 9th inning is to end it with the Dodgers winning. And so far that's happened every time. Like, am I going to be concerned if he gives up a run or two when they're up by 3? Maybe a little bit, just depending on what kind of happens, but not entirely, just because I know, the goal is to end the game. And let's say a guy like we've seen with Kimbrel, he does the fake balk. Like if the Dodgers are up by 3 runs and a guy gets on base, similar to Kenley, he's not worried about him. So yes, you could look at the run scored and be like, yeah, he gave up a run in this outing. But at the same time, if it was a one-run game, I think things would be differently in a lot of them. So I'm with you. I'm buying. I still trust him at this point. Like, yeah, to me, like until you blow a save, you did nothing to break my trust. So would I love more clean outings? Would I love him to go in there and strike out the side on 11 pitches? Absolutely. But to this point, he hasn't blown any games. So I don't feel the same nerves that I felt with Kenley, you know, the last couple of years there.
Yeah, you pointed out Kimbrel is 10 for 10 on save opportunities with the Dodgers this season. One note really quick, AJ Pollock, the guy the Dodgers traded, for those of you not tracking him, a guy we like. So nobody's rooting against AJ Pollock. Has been atrocious this year for the White Sox. Negative 0.6 wins above replacement. He's got a 246 on base percentage, a 333 slugging percentage. He missed a chunk of the year with an injury as well. So if you want to just say, what did we give up for Craig Kimbrel? Let's keep in mind that the answer is basically a net neutral financially. And you got a guy who's contributing in Kimbrel more than Pollock is over in Chicago. Some numbers on Kimbrel that I think are encouraging. Yes, he's allowed runs in 4 of his last 6 appearances, as you said. I think you pitch differently with a 4-run lead than you do with a 1-run lead. He also has 12 strikeouts of the last 19 guys that he has gotten out. You go back before that, he had 7 strikeouts in his first 23 outs recorded. So the strikeout rate is increasing. And to me, that's why I'm confident. Look, we all remember the first spring training appearance that he made, and he's throwing like 93, 94 mile an hour fastballs. And you're like, good Lord, what did we trade for? Well, guess what? The beginning of the season, that fastball was sitting 94, 95. Now that fastball is sitting 96, 97, 98. So I'm seeing the velocity tick up in the right direction. You look at the StatCast stuff, 95th percentile in whiff rate, 91st percentile in hard hit percentage and expected batting average, 87th percentile in strikeout rate. All those numbers are incredibly good. Even if you just compare his numbers to Kenley Jansen, Jansen's got a 3.5 ERA. Kimbrel, again, 4.5 ERA, but their strikeout per 9 is pretty similar. Their walk rate is pretty similar. Jansen's got a better FIP. So I would say Jansen has been better this year. But to me, I'm just watching the trajectory, and I'm seeing the fastball velocity for Kimbrel go in the right direction. Now, the curveball is the pitch that we need to see. I think it must have been, it was Sunday's game. It was just like, he didn't have the curveball. It was like in the dirt every single time he threw it. Now he hung one to get a strike 3 at the end. So it kind of worked out for him. But to me, I'm looking at a trend of where Craig Kimbrel's season is going, and I have no concerns. This is a guy that I feel good about. The velocity is ticking up. I'll just put it this way. When Jansen is wrong and he's throwing 93, 94, that's concerning. If Kimbrel at his worst is still throwing 98, it's just going to look better. It's going to look more reassuring than Jansen's ever did. And so maybe it's just an optics thing for me.
No, yeah. And to that point, you mentioned that Jansen's, his numbers are slightly better this year, but at the same time, he has 2 blown saves. So like, which would you take? Slightly worse numbers, but you're closing out the games, or, more dominant on a consistent basis, but then you give a couple up. To me, I'm taking the guy that's saving every game. I just this past week, I was watching, the Braves were playing the Phillies. Kenley, like you said, a lot of it's the optics, how he looks. I said when that outing started, Kenley does not look good right now. Like, his velo was down, and lo and behold, he throws a 92 mile an hour cutter right down the middle, and Bryce Harper hits a 2-run home run to the absolute moon. So, like you said, with Kenley, that's what a lot of it comes down to. And with Kimbrel, I think just from the eye test, from what we've seen, like you said, the velocity has ticked up. So that's a positive. That's what you want to see. Like you said, I still think there's some more work to be done on the off speed, but that's fine. We're sitting here May 30th. And really, for Kimbrel, it's really like April 30th, just because that first month was pretty much his spring training. So I still think his best outings are ahead of him, which, that's good. And also, if you look around the bullpen, the Dodgers have had some really other reliable arms. Like, you look at Daniel Hudson. Craig Kimbrel's not available the other night. Hudson comes in for the save, and he looks absolutely nasty. Like, he dots a 98 mile an hour fastball right on the outside corner to strike a guy out to close it out. So that's good to see as well. You don't feel like, we have to go to Kimbrel 2 days in a row, 3 out of 4 days, whatever. Like, you could keep him fresh for the second half of the season, which that's ultimately what's most important.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I'm not like, this is where I would have to do a little bit more digging, but I wonder if, because Jansen is relying on a pitch that involves a lot of spin in his cutter, I wonder if there's more variance from outing to outing as far as what that looks like. Because again, we all lived through the Kenley Jansen years where it was just like 3 pitches in, it's like, he can't find the strike zone and the cutter's not cutting. Whereas if Kimbrel's just throwing 98, it's like, that's going to look 98 every single time, and you're not really relying on spin a whole lot. And so maybe there's more consistency in Kimbrel's pitch mix than you would with Jansen. And like you said, maybe 8 out of 10 Jansen outings are absolutely dominant, and the other 2 are kind of a mess, and that evens out to 3.5 ERA. Whereas maybe Kimbrel, you're getting pretty much the same thing 9 out of 10 times. And yet it's a tick below the sort of the peak Jansen. I don't know, something to evaluate. But I think my headline for Kimbrel is it's going to get better. Like the velocity is ticking up again. The numbers that are encouraging to me, his first 23 outs recorded, he struck out just 7 batters. His last 19 outs recorded, he struck out 12. If that trend continues and the strikeout rate increases and the whiff rate increases and he can start to find the curveball a little bit more, then we're heading in the right direction. I will say Kenley Jansen, 12 out of 10 on hair when compared to Craig Kimbrel and whatever he's got going on coming out the back. So I've got to give Kenley the edge there on in the hair department, because Kimbrel's hair, I mean, we used to talk about Dustin May and Andre Jackson and these guys in best hair. Kimbrel is like an easy choice for worst hair, right?
I mean, Phil, I don't like Phil Bickford's either personally.
No, come on. Bill, don't do that to Bickford.
Well, I think it's the same hair. Bickford just doesn't, do the little bun in the back.
That
so
counts.
I guess that's where Bickford wins. I don't know how Craig's would look if he just kind of let it go. But yeah, me personally, I've done the whole long hair thing, as our show knows. I would never dare step into the realm that Craig Kimbrel does every game with just a little rat tail just kind of hanging out there.
Yeah, Gonsolin probably in the conversation as well. He's just got like long, stringy hair as well. So, all right. Well, that's buying or selling. Let's move on to the week ahead. A fun week of games. The Pirates and the Mets come to town. The Dodgers get to be at home, which is nice for a change. Let's start with the Pirates. This is a team the Dodgers have played once. They actually lost 2 out of 3 to the Pirates. Pirates are 19-27 on the year. They've they've won just 3 of their last 9. They just played the Padres, lost 2 of 3 to the Padres. Big picture, they are 26th in ERA this season and 29th in runs scored. So that's not exactly a great recipe for the Pirates. Some notable players, Ke'Bryan Hayes, their best player. He's the only guy with a wins above replacement above 0.8. He's at 2, so good for him, but everybody else pretty bad. Nobody has more than 6 home runs. Reynolds and Vogelbach have 6 home runs. Nobody has an OPS over 800 on the entire roster for the Pirates, or guys that have had more than like 10 at bats. They do have David Bednar, the closer, 9 saves, a 0.75 ERA. So he might be their best pitcher, their closer on a team that doesn't score runs and gives up a lot. So that's a bad place to be, one of the best closers in baseball. But let's talk about the matchups. Thompson versus Buehler tonight. Urias goes against to be determined tomorrow, and then Quintana and White is Wednesday in the final game. Let's look Thompson and Buehler. Buehler, 10 earned runs in his last 4 starts. That's 23 innings pitched, just 16 strikeouts. He's allowed 32 base runners in that stretch. You think this is one where Buehler's allowed to get back on track against an offense at home against an offense we just described is pretty terrible.
Yeah, I mean, you just read out the numbers. This should be the opportunity. Like you said, he's at home. So this just should be an opportunity for him to go out there and be dominant from start to finish. We saw in his last outing, like, he came out struggling. He's settled in a little bit from there, but overall, the Buehler we've been getting the last few weeks is probably been the worst version of Buehler we've seen. It's kind of funny to say, like, he's kind of been the weak link on the staff recently. The whiff numbers are down, not striking out as many guys. So this is a chance for him to kind of get back on track. You mentioned the Dodgers are back at home. I'm sure they're happy about that, even though they went 8-2 on the road trip or whatever. I think Gavin Lux said after the game yesterday, like, it feels like they've been gone for a month. So I'm sure they're happy to be home, happy to be facing an inferior opponent like the Pirates. The Pirates did win 2 out of 3, so maybe there is kind of a revenge factor there for the Dodgers. So this should be a series where they should come out and dominate. Buehler on the mound tomorrow. It'll be up to him to kind of set the tone there, because, like you said, he hasn't been his best recently. So this is kind of a chance for him to kind of get back going, in the right direction.
Yeah, absolutely. Zach Thompson on the mound against the Dodgers, 5.5 ERA for him. Soft tossing right-hander. You don't see a whole lot of those. A guy throwing 92-mile-an-hour fastballs from the right side. This is interesting.
When you say that, I just think, oh yeah, he's probably got an ERA in the 5s.
He's in the 9th percentile for fastball velocity, but 92nd percentile for fastball spin. So, I mean, that's weird. That's like a weird pitch. I can't really process that one. So there you go. Tuesday, we get Julio Urias. He had a rough outing against the Pirates when they did play. 6 innings pitched, 11 hits, just 2 earned runs, but 11 hits in 6 innings is pretty ridiculous. That was on May 9th. He, however, has been consistent. He has allowed 3 or fewer runs in 8 of his 9 starts this season. He has allowed 0 or 1 earned runs in 6 of his 9 starts this year. So good news for the Dodgers to have Ríos on the mound on Tuesday. And then Wednesday, probably the toughest matchup for the Dodgers. You got Mitch White on the mound. You and I did the live post game after his last start, and it was the box score looked good. The behind the scenes balls and strikes, exit velocity, that kind of stuff was not encouraging for Mitch White. And yet on the other side, you've got 33-year-old Jose Quintana, who's been very good, 2.15 ERA, top 10% in exit velocity. So could be a tough matchup for the Dodgers on Wednesday. As you look at that, I assume you like Buehler over Thompson tonight. I assume like Urias against whoever they throw out on Tuesday. Quintana versus White. Do you think the Dodgers are able to secure the sweep, or are you going 2 out of 3?
Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, with the Urias matchup, I do like that matchup, but at the same time, the Dodgers seem to not score whenever Julio pitches. They just lost 1-0 to the Nats last time. That's a stark contrast from last year when Julio wins 20 games, has the most runs support in baseball. This year, it's been quite the opposite. So while I do like the Julio matchup, obviously, we'll see if the Dodgers could give him some runs this time. Like you mentioned with Quintana, he's out of nowhere, has kind of refound it. He's been great this year. He pitched really well against the Dodgers a couple weeks ago. So I guess that's the matchup that you're kind of sketched out about. Obviously, Mitch White is the quote unquote weak link in the Dodgers rotation right now. I'm still taking Buehler over Mitch White. Let me be clear about that one. So I guess, we'll say 2 out of 3. We could say maybe the Pirates are going to take the last one. But hey, I don't see why a sweep is not possible. It's definitely, the way these guys have been playing, the way the offense has been performing. That's what you should aim for against a team like the Pirates. But you definitely want to take the first 2 when you got, Buehler and Julio on the mound against 2 guys who, let's say they're less than average. I don't want to be too mean here.
No disrespect, right, Daniel?
Yeah,
no disrespect.
But the guy's got a 5.5 ERA. So
yeah. I mean, you do point out the Dodgers lost 2 out of 3 to the Pirates. I imagine that they probably tried to sleepwalk through that series last time, and they're not going to do that again. So I think that's good. Although Wednesday, you're looking ahead to the New York Mets coming to town Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. The Mets, of course, second best record in the National League at 32-17. They've won 8 of their last 11. They are 3rd in runs per game and 12th in ERA. Looking at some of their key players, Pete Alonso's got 12 home runs and an 881 OPS, so a good year for him. Lindor, 790 OPS. Starling Marte, 738 OPS. So some struggles for those 2 guys out of the gates. Edwin Diaz, their closer, 11 saves, 2.61 ERA for him. Thursday, we've got Taijuan Walker versus Tony Gonsolin. Should be a good matchup. You've got Chris Bassett versus Tyler Anderson on Friday. Peterson versus Buehler on Saturday. We almost got Peterson versus Anderson, which would have been Duck versus Duck. I just want to point that out. Almost got it. We were just one day off. And then Trevor Williams versus Julio Urias on Sunday. So looking through those, we got Taijuan Walker versus Gonsolin on Thursday. Walker, 2.83 ERA on the year, but he does have a 1.26 whip and just 19 strikeouts in 35 innings. So that doesn't feel sustainable to me. I like the Gonsolin versus Taijuan Walker matchup as one where, look, if you're a betting person, Walker 2.6 ERA, 2.8 ERA, people might see that and say good pitching matchup. I think the underlying stuff for Walker is concerning. So I think the Dodgers may have a chance to jump on him early there on Thursday.
Yeah. And I think the most notable thing as you read off those pitching matchups is the Dodgers kind of caught a break, played the Mets at this point in time when there's no DeGrom, there's no Scherzer. So you'll take that any day of the week. I don't even care who else they're going to be facing. I promise you they're not better than those 2 guys. So that series. That's a highly anticipated series. I know obviously the Dodgers have World Series aspirations. The Mets are kind of looking like their biggest competition at the moment. So that should be a fun series, 4 games. All at Dodger Stadium. I know I'm probably going to try to get out to 1 or 2 of those games.
Yeah, and the Dodgers, look, they don't have Kershaw in the rotation, but you've got your 4 best. There's no Pepio, Grove, or Mitch White making a start in this series, so that's good news. Chris Bassett, 3.66 ERA, 1.17 whip, 60 strikeouts and 59 innings pitched. That's on Friday. That's probably the best pitcher that the Dodgers are going to be facing in this series. You've got Peterson, 2.16 ERA, just 5 appearances, 4 starts, but some pretty good numbers from him there. And then Trevor Williams, the weak link, 4.37 ERA on the year, 22 strikeouts and 22 innings with a 1.24 whip. So you look at that one again, Taijuan Walker, Chris Bassett, Peterson, and Williams, the 4 starters against Gonsolin, Anderson, Buehler, Urias. I mean, can the Dodgers take 3 out of 4 from the Mets? Does that feel like sort of the way that series is going to head?
Yeah, it does. And I hope they come out kind of with a sense of urgency, I guess is the way to put it. But hey, the Mets are a team that they think they're the best in the National League right now. And, the record, they're right there with the Dodgers. They've had a lot of come from behind type wins. So they're feeling real confident right now. So this is a good chance for the Dodgers to be like, yeah, I know you guys are building something over there. You want to be just like us, but you're not quite there yet. So yeah, hopefully 3 out of 4. That's kind of what you want. You want to just keep winning series. If you get a sweep, I'd love to bring the broom back out again next week. That'd be fun. But yeah, anytime you're winning series over good teams, that's the key. And as the commenter in our live show asked the other night, which there's no factual data, but he kept asking, the Dodgers are beating up on all these bad teams. Can they beat good teams? Well, yeah, this is an opportunity for them to kind of put that quiet that guy a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so you're going 5 out of 7. Is that what I'm hearing? Two out of 3 and 3 out of 4?
Yep.
Yeah, I think 5 wins feels about right. Like, I think a sweep is very much in the cards. Like, if you were going to take the over-under, it's probably like 5.5 is where you'd set that number. Can the Dodgers get 3 out of 3 against the Pirates and 3 out of 4 against the Mets? The way they're playing right now, the way the pitching stacks up, that you're going to get, 6 out of the 7 games played with your sort of best pitchers on the mound. Because again, Urias and Buehler, and then Anderson and Gonsolin, we talked about those two. I mean, those guys are pitching like top 2-3 rotation type guys. So if you get 6 starts from those 4 in a week, regardless of who you're playing, especially when you're playing the Pirates, one of the worst teams in baseball, you've got to take advantage. The Pirates, by the way, have the worst run differential in all of baseball, -84, and yet they are still 19-27, which is in 3rd place in the NL Central. That's sort of, they're tied for 3rd, but the Reds 3.5 games back of them on the flip side. So I'm with you. I think 5 wins sounds about right. Looking just real quick at the Padres schedule, the Padres this week, who are 3 games back. I got in trouble for tweeting that they were 3.5 games back during extra innings, because then they went on and won, and people got mad at me for jinxing it. But they play the Brewers and the Cardinals, both of those teams above 500. The Brewers are 30-18. And so if the Dodgers can go 5-2, that could be an opportunity to put some length between them and the Padres as well. So that'll do it for us today. DodgerHeads presented by I forgot to mention, by the way, I'm repping my KBO jersey. Haven't busted this one out in a while. This is a throwback. I don't even know which team it is. This was a gift. It's not a team that exists anymore. I just love it. It's a sweet look. So shout out to the KBO. My guy Puig over there, probably crushing baseballs. Haven't checked in on him in a while, but I'm sure he's doing great things. So we appreciate everybody joining. That's Daniel Starkand. That's his broom. Hopefully a friend that we'll be bringing out again shortly with sound effects today, by the way. If you missed that, we had sound effects upgrade there. So my name's Jeff Spiegel. As always, we appreciate you watching. Please subscribe, ring the notification bell below if you're watching on YouTube. If you are listening to this via podcast, please subscribe, rate, and review on Spotify, on Apple. Those subscription, the rating and reviewing is a big help to us. So please do that. Google, wherever you're getting that. And of course, Dodger Blue 1958 everywhere on social media. DodgerBlue.com for all the latest. We'll have great content. Whenever the Dodgers are at home, we have tons of post-game content on the YouTube channel and social media, so be sure to check that out. Again, that's Daniel. My name is Jeff. We appreciate you joining us. We'll see you next time.